What's up, Hookums? David Lee here, Texas Horns football. Just thought I'd jump on here and do kind of a more complete recap of Big 12 Media Days. I know we've kind of been posting some shorter videos and just kind of updates here on the page the past couple days, but just thought I'd pop on here and kind of do more of a kind of higher level kind of recap of what I saw, what I heard, and just kind of the main points that kept coming up, not only from Coach Herman, but the 5 players that he brought with him, and just kind of my thoughts on just some of the other stuff that went down, some of the other coaches that we heard from. The way the media days works, if you don't watch it live, basically they split it 5 teams and 5 teams. So Monday, it's kind of Monday 5 random teams, and then Tuesday the other 5 teams. Texas was on Tuesday, and basically they start off the mornings with usually a Big 12 kind of official representative. Bob Bowlesley, the commissioner, kind of opens everything up on Monday, and then you hear from some others. But and then the coaches have an individual press conference that lasts, I don't know, roughly 15 minutes or so, 15-20 minutes. They kind of go one by one. And then Texas, Coach Herman actually went last on Tuesday. So in the afternoons, they have breakout sessions. So each coach and then each player has their own, table, podium. And then it's just kind of a free-for-all to go ask them some questions. They're available for about an hour and a half. And sometimes you have to hang around for 10 or 15 minutes before you can kind of get your question in. Depending on how crowded it is, it always kind of dies down in the afternoon. But if you guys have any questions as we're going over this, just let me know. If you can hear me okay, just say yes, can hear you. George, I see you just popped on. If you're still on, just let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm using a little lapel mic. If you guys tuned in last night for the live interview with Jordan and Sonny Shipley, had a lot of feedback problems on their end. I plugged some headphones in on my end, so I know it wasn't my feedback because I had just the iPhone mic with the headphone in, so I think there was still feedback on their end, so we kind of tried to push through that, but it was pretty cool. George said you could see the excitement in Herman's face. Can't wait for the season. Yeah, he always gets pretty intense. So he's, Coach Herman's the type that he gives a lot of thought to his answers, and he'll give kind of a long answer. I got to ask him one question, and he gave a decent, almost 2-minute answer. So he's pretty typical for that. So he definitely puts in a lot of thought to his answers, or to the answers he gives. Overall, pretty impressed by Matt Wells, the new Tech head coach. Just seemed really confident, answered every question with confidence, so that was neat to see. And then the new Kansas State head coach, Chris Kleiman, from North Dakota State. He's been the head coach at North Dakota State for the past 4 years, I believe, and then he was the defensive coordinator for 2 or 3 years before that. So obviously he's had a ton of success at that level, and coming up to fill some pretty big shoes at Kansas State, but going to be really interested to see how they finish. I believe Kansas State was picked 9th in the Big 12 by the media preseason, so be really interesting to see if his success translates into FBS with Kansas State. So that's going to be pretty fun to watch. Just some notes from Coach Herman's press conference. There's some stuff that stood out to me from his press conference, and then the guys that he brought. I'll talk about that later. But he kind of started off by talking about he thought that overall that the Texas program was ahead of schedule, just kind of in terms of his goals heading into his 3rd year. Obviously finishing your 2nd year as head coach with a Sugar Bowl win over what most people thought to be a top 4 team in Georgia with a 10-win season. I would say that that's, somewhat ahead of schedule. But he had a quote here already. He said, we weren't here just to have a really good season or two. We're here to rebuild a program that's capable of sustaining success, and we feel like we're on our way there. So that's kind of how he started off his press conference by, feeling confident that things are ahead of schedule in terms of the direction that he wants the program to be. I would agree with him. And he's definitely not the type to overhype anything. He definitely is open about talking about concerns, and but he's also he's also quick to talking about what he's excited about. And on offense, he had a pretty interesting quote, I thought. Not necessarily talking about how things are going to change, but he said on offense, we're going to run some NFL concepts in the run game in terms of inside zone and power and counter. Those are more blocking schemes, pulling guards, tackles, things like that. And he also said we're going to run some NFL concepts in the passing game and in pass protection. He said the only difference is we're going to do it from the shotgun. So that seems to me more along the offensive line schemes. And he also said we're just going to make defenses have to defend a mobile quarterback. So yeah, that's pretty high level, that's pretty broad, but obviously that involves Sam with not just calling his number and letting him run, but letting him make decisions in the passing game from the shotgun as well. So hopefully we see some holes opening up more. And then he definitely did mention that Keontae Ingram has put on about 15 to 20 pounds of what he called armor. He said that last year was kind of a wake-up call for Ingram just in terms of staying healthy, and that Ingram knew by the end of the year that he was going to have to put on some muscle, and that he said that Ingram has learned to take what's given to him. If there's definitely 4 yards there, then take the 4 yards and don't always try to do a home run threat run. Even though that Ingram's talent is capable of that, he just needs to trust the blocking schemes and the strategy of the game. But he did mention that he's definitely put on some muscle. Sam Ehlinger also mentioned that a couple times that I heard. I specifically asked Sam, to name me, who's some of the younger players that are stepping up to become the new leaders. And he specifically mentioned Ingram right away, not only in how hard he's worked, but just how much of a role he's taken on just in terms of action, kind of a leader by action sort of a thing. So, and Coach Herman in his press conference Tuesday morning also mentioned that just the emergence of Jordan Whittington, he said, is remarkable. He said, and I'll read the quote that he said. He said, "I've never seen in my 22 years of coaching a young man having never played a certain position, even in high school, to come in and say, 'Hey kid, you're going to play tailback for us at least for this season, if not longer,' and say, 'Yes, sir.' And he took to it like a fish to water. He's a natural at it. We're really excited about him." So, and you could just tell just the way he said that, he's just absolutely thrilled about Jordan Whittington and how quickly he's adapted to playing the running back position. In high school, Jordan Whittington was kind of a do-it-all threat. He even played on defense. He played quarterback some. He played receiver. He played running back. But it looks like they're really counting on Whittington to be the number 2 running back, but also figuring out some creative ways to use him. See Clay jumping on, Brian, George, Gene. If you guys have any questions about media days or about anything, just throw them down below. I may not get to them right away, but I'll definitely go back. And then somebody asked him, Coach Herman, about renewing the A&M rivalry. And Coach Herman said he's all for it. He would love for it to come back. He mentioned several other schools that make it work out of conference, like Florida and Florida State. And heck, even Texas and Oklahoma did it for years, Southwest Conference and the Big 8, before the formation of the Big 12. That happened for a long time. So the fact that they're in two separate conferences isn't a deal. Travel obviously isn't an issue. Coach Herman even said that he thought it would be really cool for the families to be able to travel to a non-conference game against an SEC team. What is College Station? Not even about an hour and a half drive, maybe. And then he also mentioned that, since we haven't been playing the Little Aggies, that there's no longer a historic rivalry game at home in Austin. And that's kind of a good point, for season ticket holders. The one historic rivalry game we have left is Oklahoma, and that's always in Dallas. Yes, Texas Tech is a rival, but not nearly as deeply rooted as Oklahoma and A&M. So that would be cool to come back. So I thought those were two cool points that he made, and he just said he thinks it would be great for Texas, be great for the fans, great for the families, and also just great for Texas high school football of just kind of having that in-state rivalry back. So, trying to think if there's a direct quote that I wanted to read. And then, obviously, I think y'all saw somebody asked him about the Bradshaw comments about Sam Ehlinger, Bradshaw being from Louisiana Tech, who we have week 1. Herman said, it's irrelevant what other people say about us and our program. It doesn't really faze us. So the irrelevancy of it was at an all-time high. He said, Sam loves to play with a chip on his shoulder, and I'm sure he will use this to crank it up a notch. But then I heard Sam a couple times say that, it's no big deal to him. He doesn't, really matter. He kind of has, overlooks it, that he's got a lot more things going on to worry about than what Terry Bradshaw says. So on one hand, you got Coach Herman saying, Sam kind of likes to play with a chip on his shoulder, and he might crank it up a notch because of that. And Sam over here saying that, no, not really. Sam kind of did say that, yeah, I play with a chip on my shoulder anyway. He said that's just my style. That's just how I play. So that's going to be there regardless of what Bradshaw says. And in the run game, Coach Herman says that everybody's pretty healthy. Let's see. He thinks the offensive line is going to be the best offensive line, of the past 2 years. That the return of Zach Shackelford and Sam Cosme don't lose a whole lot in the offensive line, and the ones who will be starting, sort of new starters, still have a lot of playing time. So it's hard to say that how many starters, playing time is a big deal. Whether you play snap 1 of a game that makes you a starter is not that big of a deal. So, and then he went on to talk about Keontae Ingram and how he packed on that armor, as he call it, the muscle. And on defense, he was on defense. He talked a lot about how there's been a lot of leadership lost, but again, of the guys who will be starting now, like Malcolm Roach, Joseph Asai, Jeffrey McCulloch, these guys still have a lot of playing time. I believe Asai led the team in tackles against Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. If that's different, somebody post that in there, but I believe that was true. So he talked a lot about that. He talked a lot about, you're losing 8 starters on defense, but the guys that are there still have a lot of experience and a lot of snaps under their belt. He says not all of our 85 scholarship players are at championship level yet, but we can compete for a championship, certainly. And we need to make improvements on defense. We have recruited very well on that side of the ball. We have developed in the weight room very well. We're going to be young. There's no secret to that. And he said something like, young and talented is a whole lot better than young and not talented. So yeah, he did. The one question that I got to ask him in the breakout sessions, I asked him about recruiting and how big of a deal a program's ability to send guys to the NFL and how many draft picks they have, if that's becoming more important for recruits and how often that comes up in the recruiting process. I posted a video, kind of a longer video of Coach Herman, and that's in there about the 16-minute mark. But he basically just said that, yeah, it does come up a lot, and, you know, the staff is still new. You know, it's only their third season, and, you know, it's hard to judge a staff's ability to develop players to NFL caliber when you're only heading into your third season. He did specifically talk about Charles Omenihu and how when they got there, he was more of a role player, developed into a starter, and just absolutely worked his butt off and became the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year and was drafted by the Houston Texans. So he kind of used him as one specific example, but he did you know, say that it does start with recruiting, but they've also got to get guys that want to work to that level. So I think it's kind of a hard thing because, you know, getting the right players doesn't necessarily always mean getting players that are going to be drafted. So George says, I'm looking forward to seeing Devin Duvernay this season. He's underrated. Yeah, Collin Johnson and Sam both said that. They both talked about just how great of an overall athlete he was and how fast he was. Sam talked a lot about confusing a defense and forcing them to make decisions based on the weapons that they have in the run game with Ingram, Whittington, Sam himself, and the ability to use Cade Brewer at tight end, which Sam was really excited about Cade Brewer. And then what are you going to defend on the sidelines? Are you going to defend Collin and Devin deep? And then, you know, you've got options possibly like Malcolm Epps, Joshua Moore, and, you know, some of the freshmen like Jake Smith, Marcus Washington possibly getting looks in there. So he talked a couple times about making a defense decide what they're going to stop and then being able to turn right to the next thing to kind of make them stop. That's pretty much all for Coach. I stood around Coach for about 20 minutes and just kind of listened. I asked Collin Johnson, if you guys saw the video that I posted, I asked him, like, what would be one aspect of your brother's game that you would take from him and apply to you? He said his motor. He said Kirk Johnson's motor is just always moving. He said it's been that way ever since elementary school. But I asked him a little bit about that. I asked him and Sam, like, what do you do on the days that you just don't feel like practicing? You just feel like a dog and you just don't want to go out there and do it. They both kind of said that you just kind of got to focus on the bigger goal and surround yourself with your teammates. That they pick each other up. And, you know, to be a leader, you just, you know, he said it's easier when you're doing it for somebody else, basically. Like, it makes it easier when you know that you're going out there and doing it for the teammates. So the 5 guys that Coach Herman brought, again, Sam, Collin, Brandon Jones, Zach Shackelford, and Malcolm Roach. Jeffrey McCullough was there as part of a group of some kind of Big 12 charity kind of thing, or I don't know. But one player from each team was kind of part of that. I didn't get to talk to Jeffrey, but I saw him around. I'm trying to think. Every single one of those guys, absolutely way more mature than their age, handled the media perfectly. They were all friendly. They all were respectful of the questions. Not one of them that I heard ever gave just a real short, you know, answer. They always at least acted like they cared about the question. I know they were getting tired. Sam had, 40 plus media members around his podium by the time he walked up to it, more than Coach Herman. So for a junior, even to be invited to an event like that after just 1 year of being a starter is pretty rare. Coaches mostly only bring seniors to that event because, you know, it requires a level of maturity and respect to the media. You know, it's a pretty light event. I mean, it's not overly formal or anything like that. I mean, it's not like everybody's wearing a suit or anything. But you know, and obviously they're trained up to answer questions and prepared about the type of questions that they might get. You know, the most hard-hitting questions, I think, were about Bradshaw, Baker Mayfield, stuff like that. So I'll post a few more short videos. I got a short video of Brandon Jones. I asked him about 3 questions. Malcolm Roach. I did not ask Zach anything. I did stand around for a while and just kind of listen. I wanted to ask him something about how important the line was. I wanted to ask him if he believed that the game is played from the line of scrimmage out, because I say that all the time. So I wanted to I wanted to see what he would say. Hopefully he would have said yes. But let me see what some of you guys said. Brian up in New York said, young, talented defense, if they can step it up and mature early, be a big factor. Yeah, man, the Big 12 offenses are just they're hard to defend, a lot of good receivers. I stood around CeeDee Lamb for about 4 minutes on Monday from Oklahoma. He was pretty impressive, pretty soft-spoken. I've got a short video I might post just to fire you guys up and piss you guys off. But he was pretty impressive. But yeah, the defense, obviously the secondary is the strength, which should give you a lot of confidence, but it also worries me a lot because I would rather the strength be closer to the line of scrimmage. Pretty much all 4 down linemen, Texas really only has 3 true, like what I would call linemen, and then the other guys are /linebackers, depending on what looks they're going to have, because they're going to want to use 5 defensive backs most of the time. But yeah, definitely true. Man, I mean, guys like Nelson and Malcolm Roach, yeah, they're definitely going to have to step up and take, live up to their potential, especially Roach. And then, hopefully some of those guys step up and just become the leaders. Losing Gary Johnson, Brecken Hager, Charles Omenihu, Anthony Wheeler, that's a lot of leadership lost. Forget about tackling and talents and stuff like that. It's just on-field leadership is so valuable. And I remember Coach Herman saying something about that, like, when some of these upperclassmen, when they can step in and be the sort of discipline or on-field coach, that's just absolutely invaluable. George said, do you get me a souvenir? I got a media guide. I got the Texas media guide, and I got a free Chick-fil-A gift card and stuff like that. But no souvenirs. I took a quick selfie with Sam, even though he didn't know I was doing it. But yeah, it's definitely not a fan event. A lot of guys on the defensive linemen had a lot of starts last year, but didn't have a lot of starts, but played a lot of snaps. That's what Carl said. Yeah, definitely. That was the point that Coach was making was, just because you're listed as a starter, in the media guide, it will show you how many starts each player had, and how many games they appeared in last year. So you can pretty quickly see those numbers, and then of the guys who technically weren't starters, how many games did they actually play in? So yeah, there's a lot of that returning. There's a lot of returning experience. I was going to show George the media guide this year. I've got my camera turned around, so it's going to be switched, but there's the media guide this year. a whole heck of a lot thinner than it used to be. If you guys ever used to get the media guides like several years ago, it was like, I mean, it was massive. It was huge. It was like carrying around a brick. But it's pretty much just player profiles and then coaches' profiles and then stats at the back. So returning starters, 2018 stats. You can see that okay. And then, the all-time stuff. So it's a pretty quick reference this year. But yeah, it's nice. And it's always cool to kind of see, you flip through here and you see some of these guys that redshirted and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. Or what happened to him? He needs to step up. So, I don't know. It was a fun event. Definitely impressed with everybody's maturity of the 5 that Coach Herman brought, and the confidence, really. Just thinking anything else that kind of stood out. A lot of comments about Jake Smith. A couple I heard from Sam, and a couple that I heard from Collin, talking about Jake Smith. Sounded a lot like Jordan Shipley. His name came up a lot, who we talked to last night. But just great athlete, fast twitch route runner type of player. So probably a type of player that could probably take handoffs and quick dump passes and downfield passes. You're just going to have to figure out a way to use him. The way I feel about the receiver group is that it's incredibly deep. Still a lot of seniors with talent. Even throw John Bird in there. Joshua Moore was a pretty big recruit coming in. I believe he's junior, right? But here's the thing about that. When you have a deep receiver group, not everybody's going to get enough looks to make that big of an impact. And that's just because Sam's not going to throw the ball 50 times a game. We shouldn't want him to throw the ball 50 times a game. I don't want him to throw the ball 40 times. 30 to 35, I think, would be about most. And I know Coach Herman would run it down people's throat if he could confidently and comfortably control a game that way. You just don't want to have to throw the ball a lot. We got caught in that game against Oklahoma and against West Virginia, having to air it out and play, score for score, trade you. So that I don't like those type of games. But if it's Collin and Devin and Joshua Moore, Malcolm Epps, some kind of combination as a third look, whoever's that third or fourth receiver probably isn't going to get a lot of looks consistently. If you complete 28 passes a game and 9 or 10 go to Collin and another 7 or 8 go to Devin, there's not a lot of other completions left. Your third or fourth receiver is probably going to get maybe 3 or 4 catches each, and then you got to factor Cade Brewer in there. So, and then however they're going to use Jordan Whittington. But yeah, super excited, ready for kickoff right now. Miss football, miss it a lot. Ready for it, ready for the weather to get colder. So somebody's trying to come into my room. That's my daughter. Okay, anyway, guys, I appreciate you jumping on here. I'm going to get this saved and uploaded on the channel, and I'll link to it. But, Savannah, did you have any comments about Longhorns football?
Yeah.
What?
I don't care.
Okay, she doesn't care. So if you're catching this on the replay, share it out to the groups, leave a comment. We'll try to answer it. Definitely, George says, I've been saying Texas and Iowa State in the Big 12 Championship. What do you think? Yeah, Iowa State was picked third. They return a lot of players. Losing David Montgomery and Hakeem Nicks is gonna hurt them more than most people think. Montgomery was, in my opinion, kind of the heart of that offense, but definitely could be. Oklahoma's got to figure out, how Jalen Hurts is actually really going to fit in, not just in theory. So that'll be one to watch. I would say of the team that you still should keep an eye on, that most people probably would overlook, is West Virginia. But anyway, I appreciate the comments, guys. If you're catching on the replay, definitely leave a comment, like, share it out, invite, tag other people that might want to jump on. We'll try to do some more of this as the season gets closer. Welcome.